Ceasefire brings relief and anxiety to Canadians with family in Gaza and Israel, while Israelis, Canadian supporters, and pro-Palestinian demonstrators clashed in Canada during the 11-day conflict. This is the Great White North Report. Last Friday, an agreement was reached thanks to the Egyptian mediation, ended the border skirmish between Israel and the Arabs of the Gaza Strip. Now, this is nothing new. This happens every so often. It was actually pretty quiet during the Trump years. Now, I must state that this is nothing new. There is, between the Arabs and the Jews of that region, there are 2 valid claims and 2 appeals for justice, and they're not going to be abated with time. Nor is it possible to break through the impasse through a lasting peace settlement. Many Arabs will not agree to a 2-state proposal. They've rejected it 4 or maybe 5 times since 1937. Recently, the Fatah segment of the PLO have accepted the 2-state system, but Hamas in the Gaza area has never endorsed it, and they've only want the destruction of Israel. And if you ask most Arabs living in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip, they will tell you the whole region is theirs, even though their Jews have been living in that area for millennium, long before there were Arabs in that area. So there are claims. But what happened was, over the course of the 11 days, and this started in East Jerusalem, over sites to the holy shrines and illegal settlement in each other's backyards, instead of just having like normal immigration, they see it as illegally settling somewhere. So if you're a Jewish person, you just can't buy a house in a Muslim neighborhood. And I guess the same thing goes away, but there are Muslim Arabs living in Israel that have the full rights as an Israeli citizen, with the one exception is that the Arabs do not have to serve in the military. They're not conscripted. They can volunteer, and they're never put in the front line. So that's an interesting fact to note. But anyway, we got both groups here in Canada. The Israeli Canadian supporters, they made a rally in Toronto and in Montreal. And of course, once they hear that, the pro-Palestinian demonstrators, they get together. They demonstrate a few blocks away, and it overrides, and they start clashing with each other. Rocks are thrown, and the police were called in. The pro-Palestinian Arab supporters have started throwing rocks, so the police in Montreal had to use tear gas to disperse them. Now, there were demonstrations across Canada: Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, Vancouver, even Whitehorse, and in St. John's. Among the speakers at St. John's was the NDP MP Jack Harris, the federal NDP's foreign affairs critic, who said Canada hasn't done enough to advance peace and justice in the Middle East. First of all, we can't. We don't have a bone in that arena. There is nothing we can do at the moment. We don't have the power to separate anybody. For myself, I do not support Hamas. They are pro-Iranian backed. Where do you think these guys get their rockets from? Hamas hides among the civilian population, firing rockets. They even use the Associated Press headquarters building in Gaza Strip to shoot off rockets, knowing that they will be protected. And when they fire rockets into Israel, those that do land, they not only kill Jewish people, they also kill Muslims. So it's indiscriminatory in that sense. They're not targeting just Jews, or they're also targeting Muslims. It's just the way it is. Israeli airstrikes, unfortunately, are killing civilians because that's where Hamas is hiding. You fire a rocket, you pinpoint where it's fired from, you hit back at it. And that's exactly what happens. It happens to be in a building. Israelis actually gave warning to many buildings to get out. They're going to level it. So it's one of those things. It's interesting to note that the Gaza Strip, the Israelis offered it back to Egypt when they had their peace deal, and the Egyptians didn't want it back. The same happened in the West Bank with Jordan. The Jordanians actually controlled the West Bank for a while. They lost it when the Israelis took over during that war, and the Israelis offered it back, and they don't want it. They don't want these people. They're too much of a problem. So this conflict isn't going to go away, not until all Arabs in that area accept the 2-state policy and the fact that they no longer belong to most of Israel, and that the West Bank and the Gaza Strip are the only 2 places that left for them. That should be the line. Jewish settlement in the West Bank should be pulled back. A lot of the problems, because there was a time where Israel offered 95% of the West Bank area. Arafat at the time said no. So there's been many offers by the Israelis to end the conflict. All Arafat had to do was recognize Israel's right to exist. And actually in the world, people are losing patience with the Arabs of that region, which is why they've lost so much support and they have to turn to Iran. So that's what's going on in Canada. It's making things difficult for people to live and choose. And you really don't want to choose a side. But if I had to choose, I'd choose Israel over the Arabs, simply because Israel is a stable state. It's a successful state. The Gaza Strip under Hamas is a failed state. It's a hellhole. Yes, it's under Egyptian and Israeli blockade, but still, the money they get from Iran doesn't go to help build their little strip into a self-sustaining city-state. They don't make themselves into like a Nice or a Monaco, into the jewel of the Eastern Mediterranean. No, they rather buy rockets, start firing them off in Israel, send suicide bombers and whatnot. Iran supports them because it destabilizes the region. Iranians want to exert power. Also, I think Hamas joined this attack mainly because of the conflict between Fatah and Hamas. These are the two main groups in the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and Hamas is the more militant of the two, while Fatah is more of a civilian role. They had a split up. They're actually due for elections on the West Bank, and Hamas is looking pretty good right now to win a lot of seats on the West Bank, which would be not a good thing for Israel, or any of its neighbors for that matter. Saudi Arabia, Jordan, they're not looking too favorably on Hamas right now. So what happened was the leader of Fatah, a guy named Abbas, he has suspended elections because he thinks he's going to lose. So that's what's going on. There's no stability in the West Bank right now. And that's why it too is becoming a failed state. The other thing is the Arabs, they blame everything on Israel. Even this one, I found this June 12, 2017. I actually listened to most of it. It's Israel's fault when Palestinian men beat their wives. The Arabs believe everything that goes wrong in their kind of little country is the fault of Israel. That kind of blaming does not work. Remember, these Arabs also supported the Nazis during World War II. In fact, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who was a Muslim Arab, he was in Berlin helping the Nazis plan the final solution in the 1940s, which is another reason why I wouldn't support the Arabs in this case. But it just makes me laugh that they blame the Israelis for every little thing that goes wrong with them. Palestinian men beat their wives because they're allowed to in the Quran, according to their Qurans and the Hadiths. So I had to look and see how much foreign aid we give to them. It's not a lot. I was kind of surprised that we don't give as much, and it dips depending on what's going on. As of 2019, we gave $46 million Canadian. That's down from as much as $68 million back in 2016, and it peaked as much as $78 million down in 2011. Ironically, we give almost just as much money to the Communist Party of China. We gave them $41 million back in 2019. So go figure, we're not giving them that much money. Most of it is supposedly going to humanitarian aid, but I have my doubts on that, as anything that goes to the Gaza Strip would probably go to their military funding. Now it begs the question, why does Hamas start these wars? It always loses, because it basically lost this war. They were getting pounded by the Israelis. The Israelis were getting ready to really pound on them if it kept going. The longer it goes, the more the Israelis are going to throw back at them. Hamas is probably running out of rockets too to fire. They were firing thousands of rockets. Most of them got intercepted by Israelis' missile dome defense system, but a few go through. And you think the Arabs in that region would be getting tired of this bullshit. And the Arabs that come from this region to Canada, can't they see how much better it is when you live in a country that has so many multiculturalists? Like Israel is pretty multicultural. Jews come from all over the world, and they bring different things with them. And there are Arabs too, mixed in, and Christians. The only thing Hamas really gains is they gain publicity, and it makes them look good when civilians are killed, because then news networks always concentrate on the civilian casualties. Well, when you hide behind civilians, they're going to get hit. They lose the military fight, but they gain the public relations fight. You know, the Arabs in that region are starving for basic necessities, but yep, Hamas devotes its money and resources to build imprecise rockets and missiles to launch at Israel every few years. They hide weapons and ammunition in schools and mosques. Hamas exploits its civilians, and that is so true, and that's why I do not support them. So if push came to shove, if I was to choose a side, I would choose Israel, just because Israel protects its people, while the Arabs of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip do not. They will sacrifice their people, and until the Arabs understand that and start loving their children more than anything else in this world, accept a two-state policy. So any Canadians out there, let me know what you guys think of the whole Israeli-Arab situation that just burst out, as it obviously played out in Canada too. Who should we support? Should we get involved? What is the best solution? What would possibly work? Leave comments below, and until next time, this has been the Great White North Report.